Those of you who got an invite, welcome to Nerd Prom.
No matter where in the world you are, we're all Nerds International. With the hyphen. Nerds International proudly presents.
We want to take you on a quest for knowledge. One that will take us from ancient medieval fantasy across the far reaches of space to the distant future. To many savage worlds.
Welcome to this bonus episode of the Wild Eye Podcast. This is a podcast dedicated to Pinnacle Entertainment's Savage Worlds, aimed at beginners and veterans alike. What's happening there, Eric? What are we doing today?
We're going to talk sci-fi tonight. We invited someone special. He's got a project coming up soon, and it got me real intrigued because, well, let's start with this. It's about hard sci-fi, and I told him before we started recording, I don't quite understand it, hard sci-fi, what that means, and so he's going to explain that for us. He's got this company, Intellistories. His name is Luis Enrique Torres, and he's about to launch 7 Worlds, a hard sci-fi setting for Savage Worlds. Hi, Luis. How are you?
Hello, Eric. How are you? Thanks for inviting me.
So, your company's name is Intellistories. I take it Intellivision was taken? I don't know if you remember that crappy game from back in the 80s that came
I do
out.
remember that. I do remember that game. I'm sure it was taken. Didn't look for it, but I'm sure it was taken anyway.
The good old Intellivision, man. They had some funny games when that first came out. You want to talk about 8-bit graphics? Wow. Hard sci-fi. I'm looking forward to this because I, unlike Eric, know what hard sci-fi is. Eric likes the hard sci-fi. He just doesn't know it yet. That's not really as far as I'm pushing that button. But science fiction, it's right up my alley. I bought all the stuff for The Last Parsec when it came out. I've seen most of the sci-fi shows that you're referencing when you started, or on your website. The Battlestar Galactica, the reboot, was my probably all-time favorite show ever. Talk about an amazing piece of machinery. And then when the battle scenes came in, we'll get into that later on. Let's just leave it at that, or this is going to take forever. I feel some rambling coming on all of a sudden, and I just got here.
Yeah, plus Gary listens to a lot of science podcasts, so you might be able to sound smart for once.
Wow. Thanks, pal. I appreciate that vote of confidence. I will try and do my best. Okay, well,
it's that, or we could talk about 50 Fathoms. So
either or, I'm good because that is my other favorite setting. Unreal!
All right.
I can't believe I came off a vacation for this.
All right, Gary, why don't you start with giving us some contact info in case people want to get in touch with us?
Are you sure I'm smart enough to do this, Eric? Okay, you can email us at thewildeye@gmail.com or keep up to date by getting over to our Google Plus page. Also, the Nerds International Google Plus page, and follow us on Twitter at @thewildeye. Finally, you can support the show and get early access to new episodes by going over to our Patreon page. There'll be show notes, links in the show notes, but it is patreon.com/thewildeye. I think we got a new Patreon this week, don't we, Eric? Something like that. I think I see at the bottom here.
Yeah, today. Yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, for our Patreon supporters, Sean, I prefer that his name be Riker. I really hope it is Sean Riker.
Richard.
Come on. The one, the only, the mega talented Zovia. We got Tony Fanning, Rob Towell. That's actually kind of a funny last name. John Peterson, Manuel Sams. Manuel is part of the show. See, this is once again, if you subscribe to the Patreon page, you could end up being a host on the show. Tom Lewis, DDM, Big Dave, the Digital Dungeon Master. Thank you very much. Steve Dragonspawn. That's just, what can you say about Steve? Eli Kurtz, Matthew J. Hansen, Matt Stark, Perry Chalmers. This clown wants some beats. I don't know what's up with that guy. John Steve, Pure Mongrel. I missed out on that interview, and I'm pretty upset about that, to tell you the truth. Peter Adams, Peter Beckett, James Clark, and our newest patron, what's his name, Eric?
David Maurice Garrett.
Close enough. You'll find links to this and all of this in our show notes.
All right, well, let's get between the covers with Lewis. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Welcome, one and all, to Between the Covers, the hottest and most greased up segment on this podcast. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, things are gonna get a bit weird in here.
No, it's nothing sexy.
Sorry, what?
It's kind of where we talk about a Savage Worlds book from cover to cover.
Like some sort of book club.
Well, essentially, yes.
Well, in that case, I'm leaving. Oh, yeah. See you later.
All right, Luis Enrique Torres from Intellistories. Your experience with RPGs. What say you, sir?
What say you? Okay, that's very connected, Gary, to what we're going to talk about today, right? Well, I've been playing, like many of us, since the 1980s, D&D mostly. Had my group going on, and I got into Traveller in high school. I found Traveller I think it's considered the first science fiction role-playing game. And when I found it, I thought that'd be the way I'd go. But unfortunately, my gaming group did not agree. So I just left it in my bookshelf and played D&D. I stopped playing when in college and just got back into it about 12 years ago or 13 years ago. And it's been nonstop since then.
Yeah, 12. Go ahead, Eric.
Tell me... So you live in the U.S. now, but you're originally from Peru, right?
Yes, as you have probably noticed from my name and from my pronunciation, English is my second language. Yes, I live in the United States, but I'm originally from Peru in South America. Yes, and that's where I play D&D.
Yeah, how's the gaming scene over there?
Right now, it's hot. At the time, there were very few of us. There were very few of us playing. Right, D&D had not become or role playing in general had not become what it is today. But even so, there's a big movement like everywhere else in the world, and it's great that via the internet now we can all play together and we can all join. And you've probably seen people from all walks of life and all parts of the world playing in many of the games you or everyone else runs. Right.
Yeah, because I remember we met because of the internet, and that was probably 4 or 5, maybe 6 years ago. And I had to remind you of that. I remembered your name.
Yes, at an FG Con.
Yeah, FG Con, a long time ago, playing a Fate game, a Dresden Files game that was pretty amazing. And then I found out, I think it was after the game, for some reason, I was browsing the Triple Ace Games forums, their product page, and turns out your name showed up a couple times there. So you've actually written before. You're not coming out of nowhere now, right?
No. I got. Right now, I've recently, besides this project, obviously, I've written several one-page adventures for Triple Ace Games. After that happened, Wiggy and the team from Triple Ace Games asked me to maybe support Sundered Skies, which next to 50 Fathoms, I think is one of my favorite all-time settings. And I wrote 2 full adventures for Sundered Skies and then one Daring Tales of the Space Lanes adventure. There goes sci-fi. And I've recently started with the mega campaign for Morpheus, an Actum Cthulhu campaign called Assault on the Mountains of Madness. So yeah, there's been some activity in writing and creating stuff for Savage Worlds before.
Oh.
That's quite the background there. And for a little bit of hard sci-fi, take this with a grain of salt. I'll probably get some hate mail, or people will write me to tell me that I'm wrong. But right now there's something going on in Hawaii. They're trying to build this new telescope array on Earth, and I'm pretty sure they're trying to pass it or put it through in Hawaii. But because Hawaii is like a U.S. tourist destination, and there is actual natives that live in Hawaii and stuff like that, they're having a hard time getting all the permits through to build this telescope that they want to put in there. And I think that they're actually thinking about moving it to Peru because they can get it built quite easily down there. And there actually already is some very large space telescopes down there. Hard sci-fi that, Eric. So it's probably 100% pure wrong, but
I'm turned on here.
There are several places in the world where, because of the altitude or how clear the sky is, for example, the desert in the south, in the northern corner of Chile next to Peru, there are awesome places for putting telescopes. And yes, you're right. But when you said about getting feedback from hard sci-fi, just let me tell you, one of the things you probably know this about hard sci-fi is that someone out there will always find a hole in whatever you're saying, because someone there always knows more science that you do. Yeah. And that's the challenge with hard sci-fi.
We don't care what they have to say. That's one thing you'll find out here.
So yeah, like I said, it's just Gary and I tonight because it's too late over there in the UK and Germany, but Harrison managed to send a question anyway. So he says, "Yo, Luis, as a big fan of sci-fi and especially grounded, well thought out sci-fi, Seven Worlds appears to appeal to me very much. The Kickstarter in that case holds a lot of promise, and as such, I will be sharing it with my friends. So my question to you would be, if you were to be served a bowl or a cone of any flavor ice cream, which one would you choose and why?"
That's a great question, actually. Well, to be frank, I'm not very into sweets. I don't know if that'll get me booted off the show right now, or right here and now, or not. But okay, ice cream. Well, as I've already said just before, I come from South America, and I think I'm going to give Harrison an answer I think he doesn't expect. My favorite kind of ice cream, my favorite flavor is egg fruit ice cream. I repeat, egg fruit ice cream. You get some amazing fruits, from places in the jungle and exotic places. And egg fruit, which is called lucuma in Spanish, is the kind of ice cream that when you try it, you just don't go back. So, Harrison, there's something for your bucket list. You've got to go and try egg fruit or lucuma ice cream, and you'll see what I mean.
Can you describe the taste? Is it like other fruits that we might be familiar with?
Eric, can you describe the taste of chocolate? Although then it's amazing, it's great. It's very hard to describe it, It's it's hard to describe. It's not that sweet. It's sweet but not that sweet. It's like a mango, but it's got its own special taste.
Does it taste like egg?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
No, it doesn't.
That's good.
But yeah, it's the first thing you'd imagine from the name, right? Egg fruit. I wonder who put who named the fruit egg fruit. But
I'm not going to find out like a week from now that this thing is loaded with alcohol, am I?
No, you're not. Unfortunately, you're not going to find it out.
Yeah.
But you can check it out. Remember the name of Spanish, and if you look it up, you'll find it. It's lucuma, Lucuma, and you'll be surprised.
Sounds interesting. And Eric, I'm disappointed that you didn't read that in an English accent.
Because I can't. You know me. What's putting me on the spot, man?
Harrison Hunt. He has another question, and it goes something along the lines of, also, mate, what's the worst sandwich you've ever eaten?
That's a hard question. I mean, I really like sandwiches. As long as it's fresh, it's good with me. What I think I can tell you is what I cannot stand in a sandwich, though, jalapenos. If when I get a sandwich with jalapenos, that's something that I just can't handle. It maybe I'm too sensitive to hot stuff, but jalapenos and sandwiches don't go well with me.
Seattle is rubbing off on you. It is softening your taste buds. Your once manly Peruvian jungle taste buds have been...
You're right. That's a good point. I hadn't thought about it that way. Yeah, you're right.
They've been dampened by the soft city streets of Seattle. Oh, that's too funny. So, yeah, no, that's really cool. Seattle, I've been through there many times as a truck driver. I delivered bricks and lumber and stuff like that. I've been down there so many times, it's insane, down the I-5 corridor. And yeah,
we don't.
I know. Moving on. Thanks, Eric. I appreciate your kindness.
Anytime.
What else you got for us, Eric?
Well, let's just dive into Seven Worlds. We'll start up with Fuzzy Goblin. He wants to know what sets Seven Worlds apart from the other sci-fi settings.
Oh, that's a good question. I think we'll probably answer that question throughout this conversation. But in short, I would say that the four things that make Seven Worlds unique are, number one, that it's got an epic galaxy-shattering campaign. It's been designed with a campaign in mind. And if you've seen Battlestar Galactica, or if you're an old-timer and you've seen Babylon 5, or if you follow The Expanse, you'll know what kind of campaign we're talking about. Second of all, that the science is very real, and we've tried to make the science as close and as approachable as possible, but at the same time make the player and the GM feel that they're playing in a real scientific world. Third, that the space battle rules are unique. As a consequence of trying to do a real sci-fi, we had to tweak the science fiction a bit, the science battle rules a bit, and the result makes for a very unique experience. And finally, that, again, to make you feel more immersed in the science, we created a 3D star map that you can run on Windows or Macs or most machines and operating systems. And instead of looking at a map on a page, you can look at a 3D map and walk through it. So I would say those four things might be the most unique things about the game.
Fair enough. Let's ask the question now then. What is hard sci-fi, Luis?
Oh, what is hard sci-fi? Let's put it this way. We've all seen the battles in Star Wars, and we've all seen the Enterprise fight Klingons, and we like those battles, and we like what we've seen, but we do know that while they're exciting, they're not that very realistic, right? In real space, battles are, or would be, in theory, waged across thousands or hundreds of thousands of kilometers. Ships don't careen and fly like World War I dogfight airplanes, and noise doesn't move in space. Explosions, there's no air or oxygen in the earth for an explosion to appear. So there's many things that are different between how we usually experience sci-fi when we watch it on TV or in the movies, and how it would really happen if we were in space, right? So hard sci-fi is how writers or game designers try to build worlds in science fiction that try to follow the real rules of science and try to be more faithful to how things would, in theory, really be. That's hard sci-fi.
Eric, have you ever watched Star Trek where the Borg is chasing them? Like, or pretty much pick an alien and have them chase the Starship Enterprise and watch it on TV. It's always linear. They always are going in a straight line, like they're two cars on a road chasing one another. Wasn't until, I'm sure there's others, but it wasn't until Battlestar Galactica, the reboot, came out. If you haven't seen it, Eric, it's fantastic. I think it's 5 seasons. Yeah, start to finish. Have you seen some of the battle scenes where the ships are coming at one another and they pass by, you know, at like such incredible speeds, and then you'll see the little blasts of air come out of the front of the ship as the ship basically just rotates 180 degrees and continues to fire, even though it's going like 7,000 miles an hour in reverse, and then it just spins again? Or some of the other cool stuff is like you'll see a ship come up from underneath. Instead of being very linear, like two cars chasing each other down the road, now in Battlestar Galactica is one of the first times I'd ever seen ships or space battles that were coming in from all different angles, which is something that is pretty unique about that setting.
Yeah, the thing about hard sci-fi though is when you say oh yeah, we're gonna follow the science. At first glance, it sounds very dry, very boring, and it probably sounds very intimidating, right? You need to know all the science in order to get into the game. But when done the right way, you find that there are many interesting things that happen, or many rules, or many consequences of the game that you wouldn't have thought of, and that make actually the setting feel different, the setting feel alive, and you end up doing different things. Because in the end, when you're playing a typical science fiction role-playing game, you're still doing the things you do here on Earth, only you're doing them in space. For example, you're walking on the bridge of the spaceship. You're walking on the bridge of the spaceship. But in reality, in space, you wouldn't walk. You would glide, you would fly, you would float around the bridge of the spaceship. How does that change the way space combat happens when someone boards the ship and you're fighting someone inside the ship, right? So there's many awesome role-playing moments that can be built if we just take advantage of these hard science fiction things and turn them into something easy to play.
Yeah. Could it be that part of the appeal of playing a hard sci-fi campaign is how you solve problems by using science instead of, I don't know what else we use when we try to solve problems playing fantasy, but we don't use any kind of rationale. We use cinematic tropes pretty much, right?
Yes, you're right. That's part also of the fun. Now, there's people who enjoy all the detail, the complexity, and getting all the science right inside the game. While Seven Worlds has been we base it on real science as much as possible. What I try to do is to make sure that it is playable by someone who is not interested in getting that science. If you just want to play a game, maybe there's one or two special things that you need to know, but other than that, it's just Savage Worlds. As I said, one or two setting rules, but nothing major that has to change in order for you to enjoy. The only added advantage is that you feel that you are playing the way it would happen if you were really in space, if you were really in that situation.
Okay. So let me ask you, go ahead, Gary.
I was just going to say, like, one of the nice parts about Savage Worlds, especially for me coming from D&D, is that it's rules light. With this hard sci-fi setting, are you adding too many elements of it that are going to overcomplicate the system? And I don't know how much it's written right on your webpage, but heat is one of the new factors that you've brought into your setting and stuff like that. And when I was reading it, I like the idea. There's a lot of those things like, Deadlands has guts, and, this has mental toughness for your psionics and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, there's always little additions that you can put on, or little clicks that you can knock into your game. But with the hard sci-fi setting, is there too much? Or do you know what I mean? Like, does the question come out right?
Yes, I understand. I mean, it's very, very easy to just pile rules on rules on rules on rules. We had to delete a lot of those. And I think that the way it is written right now, there is very few additional rules that are added to the game. Maybe where most new rules are concentrated is in the space battle rules. And you mentioned heat, just so that the listeners can understand what we are meaning by that. Is not many people are aware that in the coldness of space, there is a huge chance that on a spaceship you might die out of heat. Because human bodies generate heat, all the engines generate heat, all the systems on a ship generate heat, and there's no atmosphere in space that will help dissipate the heat. So the heat gets stored, and the ship gets warm, really, really warm, and basically, unless you have a very strong heat management system, you could die of heat, of overheating inside a spaceship, which is in the cold of space. So when writing the rules, we said, how can we take advantage of this fact, which is a little known fact, and turn it into a cool rule that enhances the scientific validity of the setting, right? It makes it cool. Cool. That's a pun. So what we ended up doing is we created this new stat for spaceships, which is called heat. And whatever you do, for example, you fire a laser beam, or you turn on the engines and move really fast. Whatever you do, everything you do has a heat cost, which gets added to a heat pool. And there's a heat engineer inside the ship. One of the characters is a heat engineer. And once per round, he or she gets a chance to dissipate the heat that has gotten accumulated that round. And he or she makes a roll with a specific bonus or penalty. And all the heat points accumulated act as a penalty. And if he or she makes a good roll, all heat gets dissipated that round, and he or she doesn't, heat basically acts like a point of fatigue for the ship, thus making it harder to play. And what this adds, it adds two great things to the game. Number one, now every player has a stake in balancing what they do with how much it costs. Okay, you want to fire all those missiles, great, but you know what you're doing to your ship. You're adding a lot of heat. And second of all, there's someone else in the game, in the ship, who now has something cool to do. It's not just the pilot and the guy who fires the missiles and the rest of the party is just, being a passenger on the ship. Now there's a heat engineer who has to work in tandem with the pilot and with the gunners to make sure that the ship stays in tip-top shape. And if you're smart in how you balance all of this, you can beat your enemies. And if you're not, maybe your enemies won't have to do too much to beat you.
Yeah.
One of the things that, like the hard sci-fi aspect of it, trying to keep everything true to form, that was sort of the reason that I was asking that question. It's because you can start layering on all of these things that can, like counting ammo in a Deadlands campaign, can just sort of weigh it down instead of taking away or adding to the enjoyment of it. I really like that, because in the 50 Fathoms campaign, I had set up everybody to do certain things. Somebody steered the ship, the captain gave the commands, somebody did the hoist. Everybody had a little job to do when they were driving the ship along. And I was reading about the heat and stuff like that. I like that it's an added element to the game, but it's very subtle. It's not overly complicated. Have you done other things like that? Like, is there gravity rules? Is there like food rules or any other kind of hard space stuff that...
Yes. There's a few things. Again, I've tried to keep it simple, but we had to include some of that in order for you to feel that you're really in space. For example, ships have no gravity, so people are floating around. But what I imagined is that using a technology that right now is being researched here on Earth, which is superconductor technology, which basically I imagined suits that would be filled with superconductive material, so which basically act as magnets. So imagine that you are floating through a corridor in a ship, and you just say you want to move forward, and magnets on the walls and on your suit just push you moving forward. So you basically glide or roll or jump or fight as if you were a superhero flying. But basically there's a scientific basis for that, which is that the walls and your suit are coordinating via magnets, repelling and pulling you, so that you can just fly around, right? So in game rule terms, there's gravity rules, which have been in Savage Worlds since the first science fiction toolkit, maybe 8 years ago, and we didn't do too much we didn't need to add much to that. It's just a penalty or a bonus that you use, and if you roll a 1 using your gun, you get recoil. So just by using that couple of rules and creating the trapping of the superconductors, you get players who can imagine themselves basically flying through the ship and doing all kinds of cool acrobatic movements without gravity, and at the same time keeping the realism of the setting. So we've tried to add those tiny little rules that don't weigh too much, but at the same time make it feel cool.
From what I understand, reading your website and the review also, there's a review from Andy Slack. it seems like a lot of the science behind everything in the game is explained, well, a lot of it anyway, is explained with these sidebars. Would that be one of the sidebars saying this is why you can move that way inside a ship, and then the superconductors?
Yes, there is one of the things while writing this, I said, wouldn't it be cool if someone who wants to learn more about science and about all these cool things has a way to learn about them? So why don't we write just some sidebars that explain the scientific concept? So even if you end up not playing the game, you can just read through the book, and there's a lot of science that you will learn. We explain how gravity works. We explain all this topic about heat. We talk about many, many interesting things, such as, for example, what happened. How do people go to the restroom in space? How do people eat in space? What are the chances of finding alien life in space? So many scientific concepts and ideas are explained in the book. Superconductors are the technologies explained it as well. I would imagine when I wrote it, I was imagining maybe a dad who wants to play a science fiction game with kids and wants to take that as an opportunity to teach them more science. So what should we write there, right? And that's why the book has sidebars. And something else that I don't know if you managed to notice about the book that I was really, really excited about this. The book, as it's planned right now, it's about 217 pages long. And on the top of each page, there's a distance line. And that starts on page number 1 and ends on page 217. It's a continuous line that goes across all 217 pages of the book. And that line it's a scale, the distance between the sun and the nearest star to the sun, which is Proxima Centauri. So if you look at it on page 1, you see the sun, and you see Mercury, and see the Earth, and you see Jupiter, and you see all these all the worlds in our solar system, and then the line goes on, and you keep leaving, and you say, wow, doesn't this line never end? And then you realize how big really space is, right? So I thought it'd be really, really cool just by looking at the pages and looking for the book, realizing that how far we are from the closest star we are from, right? That's the closest. There's nothing closer than that, and yet it's incredibly far, 4 light years away. So that's, for example, another way in which we try to use the book as a way to teach science and to have people who like science find a nice way of seeing it graphically.
That's clever.
Yeah. How exactly did you handle going to the bathroom in space? And let me set an example for you. Let's say that you've had a sweet bowl of Peruvian spicy chili. Now, the ship's medic system doesn't have any Imodium, and you're in your spacesuit, and there's no gravity. What happens when things start to go south?
I will not answer that question, but I'll try to answer it in a different way. And I'm not making this up. Ships, can travel at very, very high speeds. And when something hits you at a high speed, the energy in that object can make lasting damage, even if it's not a missile, even if it's just a rock. A rock at high enough speeds can basically destroy a ship, right? So some people have been asking themselves, what if we use whatever we have here in the ship that we're not using right now, for example, stuff that humans don't need anymore, and we release it as missiles? As soon as it gets out into space, it'll get frozen at minus 273 Celsius or 0 Kelvin temperatures, which will make them as hard as a rock. And given the speed differentials, they would hit any other ship and create lasting damage to it. So believe me, there have been thinking about how to use those scenarios, such as the one you've just mentioned, to their military advantage. And that, again, is one of the marvelous things that you can find out when you look at science and you see how different things are in space from the way things are on Earth.
Yeah, Eric was probably thinking you could just roll down the passenger window and hang your butt out. But now he knows it's like minus 200 and some odd degree Kelvin. You would freeze your butt cheeks. So you'd have to find a different way to launch it.
But you could destroy an enemy ship.
You could.
I would call it the torpedo.
Well done.
Why didn't I include that in the game? That's
Well
a great
done.
name.
Insert hurrah or clap noise here for Eric. That was awesome. Wow. Oh, brother.
But you see, all joking aside, that's a very interesting. That's a very interesting way of noticing how differences in temperature and differences in speed make innocuous things change the way they behave in space, right? And that's the kind of facts and ideas and thoughts that we've tried to include in the game, right? So it's very interesting to read, even if you end up not playing it. There's a lot of interesting scientific things that you can find out by reading the book.
Right. Let's reel it back a little bit here because, I mean, we've all had different experiences with Savage Worlds. Mine is that it does cinematic, well, movie-like adventures and campaigns work very well. Now, I was thinking about this earlier today and asking myself, well, Eric, have you ever tried playing a realistic type of campaign in Savage Worlds? And the answer was no. So, and that ties into a question from Paris. So what aspects of the Savage Worlds rule set made it the best fit for this setting? Because this wouldn't be the first thing someone thinks about when they think about Savage Worlds, hard sci-fi.
Right. Well, first, let me start by saying that I think we've already touched on this a few minutes ago, but there's not a lot. There are many rules, but the idea was not to turn Savage Worlds into a hard science fiction simulation. The idea was to give Savage Worlds the trappings of hard science fiction, so that the rules are most of the same rules, but there's a rationale, a story behind it that explains why that is behaving that way in a hard science fiction setting. So players who are looking for very detailed rules on how the metal in the engine gets twisted at a specific temperature, that's not what you're going to find in this game, right? You're going to find the good old Savage Worlds rules, plus a set of new rules. But again, the idea is to give you the feeling, the trapping of hard sci-fi, not to immerse you into a scientific mathematical simulation or astrophysical simulation of space. So given that goal, obviously Savage Worlds is a great fit since it gives you a very light way of playing the game, right? When I was playing D&D, when I got back to gaming after my stint in college, I started playing D&D 3.5 as a player. And maybe it was because I had gotten older or because I was getting married or whatever. I felt it was way too complex for me, right? And the other thing is I love science fiction. I don't know if this has happened to you, but can you imagine science fiction without spaceship combat? And D&D didn't have any good vehicle combat rules. I remember the old D&D expert set came out with sea combat rules, and I read them. I was so eager. I got the D&D Blue Box expert set long ago, and when I read the page, I think it was 3/4 of a page for sea for ship rules, I was like, this is it. So Savage Worlds came along. I read the vehicle rules. I read the chase rules, and that's when I said Savage Worlds is the game for me. And from now on, I'm only going to be playing Savage Worlds. I just fell in love with the vehicle rules and the chase rules, and the way that they just fit so seamlessly with the character rules. Right, makes sense. You know, a character can shoot at a ship. They could do something inside a ship. The rules are not that different. It's not like a completely different mini game. The rules are very similar. So Savage Worlds made sense from the point of view of keeping the player in the game, but giving them a hard sci-fi trapping. And I think those who played, like Gary, those who played Last Parsec have seen that it works with space rules. And in this case, that's more or less the feeling you'll get, right? Like Last Parsec, but with hard science fiction trapping.
So basically, the rules stay the same. It's more the fluff, the flavor of the game that is hard sci-fi. If I
Right,
understand.
with a few rules additions, mostly in the space battle rules, as we talked about heat and about many other types of because actually, interesting fact, one of the largest uh, not many people have used the missile rules in Savage Worlds. In the Gear chapter of Savage Worlds, there's a page devoted to missiles, and they haven't been used much. And this game uses the missile rules a lot. And when you use the missile rules, I mean, it's like a whole new dimension of Savage Worlds that I hadn't really played too much with, and I haven't added the rule. I've just used the rules that are already in the book. But many people who use missiles the way Seven Worlds uses them, they will find out. They will say, "Well, where did all of this come from? Well, where did all these new things come from?" And I'll just say, go and read, go and read. I think it's page 42 of the Explorers edition of the Savage Worlds Deluxe Explorer edition, because the rules are all there. So actually, Seven Worlds uses many rules that are in the Savage Worlds rule book, but that are not very commonly used. Social combat is another example.
So from what I read, this doesn't need the sci-fi companion, right?
No, you don't need the science fiction companion to play. I really wanted to use it, but the goal of the science fiction companion is a little bit more different. It's a little bit more pulpy, right? So you've got aliens and you've got all these things. So they did not fit that well with the trapping that we were trying to make. So it was a matter of not including it. In fact, that was step one. But in the end, it didn't mesh that well with the hard science fiction flavor we were going for.
Makes sense. Speaking of hard sci-fi, again, I'm always going back to that, right?
You're always trying to get some more hard, aren't you?
Yeah.
Just can't get enough of that hard.
There's something called the Atomic Rocket Seal of Approval. What is that?
Okay, well, there's a site called Atomic Rockets. It's run by an amazing guy called Winchell Chung. He's a fan of science fiction with a lot of hard science fiction knowledge. And many years ago, he decided to create this site to support science fiction writers who needed scientific background to create their science fiction stories. And what started, I think, like as a small project of his, little by little became a huge thing. And now Atomic Rockets is like the #1 site for people who need hard science fiction knowledge for games, books, or whatever, right? So if there's any kind of scientific question around hard science fiction that you want to look, you go there and it's probably there, from how engines work or what the formulas are for things or whether aliens exist, anything. I mean, it's amazing the amount of scientific stuff that's there. So Winchell created this seal of approval page in which whenever they found some kind of book, game, product, whatever, that uses hard science fiction and that leverages the hard science fiction stuff that they have written, Atomic Rockets, and does a good job of it, they will give them the seal of approval, which basically means that it really follows hard science fiction principles. It's aligned to what the website has to say, and it's something of a guarantee to readers or users or players or whatever that the product is really using hard science fiction the right way, right? So when I finished Seven Worlds, I let Winchell know about it. He was really happy to review it, and I'm so happy to say that he loved it. I mean, it's very humbling to know that people who know science that well like what you did. I am not an astrophysicist. I'm a computer engineer. So I have nothing to do with space other than that I like it. And knowing that people who are really astrophysicists or really scientists have looked at this and say that it really makes sense, it's really humbling and really, really good to have gotten that seal of approval. So the important thing to remember for your listeners is that gamers who like realistic science fiction now know that there is an assurance that we've taken the science seriously in this game.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I was really, really amazed, and the company that Seven Worlds now has in the seal of approval page for Atomic Rockets, it's also really, really good.
What's the movie that Matt Damon just did where he gets stranded on Mars?
Martian.
Martian, that's right. Did Martian have something to do with this? Like, I know the story behind the book. The guy that wrote the book released it chapter by chapter to the scientific community and had them go over it. They came back and said, well, this is actually how you would do this, and this. So the movie is actually sort of the same thing. It's really based on true science. This is exactly, these are the way that you would get things done. That was the selling point for that Martian movie for me. That's what really made me watch that, because, sometimes you can get sci-fi hokey and pokey and stuff like that. But yeah, your hard sci-fi is not going to have any magic casters in it solving problems by blasting holes in the doors and stuff and such like that, which is another neat thing. Essentially, I get the feeling from this that the hard sci-fi trapping that you're going for is it, if you're going to do something or you're going to try and solve a problem or you're going to shoot a gun or whatever, it sort of has to be realistically possible.
Well, yes, actually, to comment to that, first of all, I read the book about the Martian. I loved it, and I agree with you. It's a great way to explore science while reading a gripping story. By the time I read the book, most of Seven Worlds had already been written, so I was not able to include too much about the Martian in the book. But it's great, and I think everyone agrees that the movie also was extremely exciting. Now, I'm feeling a bit ashamed by what you just said, since you. To be frank, I did. We've been talking about hard science fiction, but there are some sections in which Seven Worlds cheated, and there are spellcasters in this game. Oh no, I just said it.
Well, the thing is even with the Martian movie, they had to change some stuff, like when he's puncturing his hand to fly up into space and all of that kind of stuff, right? Like, you can't tell a good story sometimes without throwing in that little bit of fantastical element into the deal as well.
Right, you've got in the end, everything is a slave to the story, right? The story rules, and Gravity, which is the movie you may remember from like 3 or 4 years ago, which was like also an amazing science fiction movie, very real, had sections in which you could basically have a discussion or have questions about the science. For example, the fact that there's two stations and they are so close together that you can get from one to the other one, but in reality, they're not even in the same orbit. So there's all these details that the movie is so hard sci-fi, so realistic that you can basically forgive them for the sections in which they jumped out, because in the end, it's a story that matters, right? And in Seven Worlds, we also had to basically bend a few rules in order to keep the game playable within the framework of hard sci-fi. But I did include an appendix so that players who are looking for hard sci-fi can read it and know exactly where we bent the rules, and where the rules of science, where we bent the rules and where we decided to just go our own way.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because this is where I'm coming from with the hard sci-fi, is that, like you said, we're trying to tell a story together as a group, and sometimes, the facts, the science might get in the way of creating, like traveling at the speed of plot, if you do that sometimes, okay, you guys are stuck traveling for, 12 years now. So that's going to be the role play. You want to advance the story, or maybe they find a loop or, wormhole or whatever, even if it's not possible because the story demands it.
Yes, I totally agree with you. And actually, when you try to follow hard science, some restrictions appear, right? Even if it's just a trapping, right? You sometimes feel like a little bit more caged than if just science is all fluffy and you can just do whatever you want, right? To be frank, we tried to keep it a hard science fiction setting, but there's 3 major scientific things that we had a break to keep this going. And I think when I shared it with you, you'll agree. One of them is FTL, or faster than light. You don't want people to be traveling 47 years to get from one planet to the other one. That's not fun, right? You want them to get on a ship and maybe a few days or hours or weeks later be at the other side, and then game continues, right? And then the game continues and nothing happened, right? Otherwise, there's no game, or the game is just being inside a spaceship. The second one is Earth-like planets. We want to go from one Earth-like planet to the other one, or at least human livable planets. The fact is that Earth twins are very, very uncommon. I could even say almost impossible to replicate. You will not get a perfect Earth twin. But we wanted Earth twins in this game, and you want to reach planet A and walk around without a suit, and planet B and walk around without a suit, and all that thing. So we included Earth twins, or planets that are very similar to Earth. And number C, psionics, and that's the third thing. We added psionics and psionic powers, and there's a good rationalization of the game. We explained the logic and We gave all these reasons so you can keep your sense of disbelief in the game. But the truth is, we all like magic in our games. It's cool. It's fun. There's players who like that role. There's a way to get it into the game with that. So I would not take that out of the game because it makes it fun, right? So we just needed to make sure that. And those are the main three things where we decided to make it less hard than it could have been. And I think all three of them are justified when you look at them from the point of view of fun.
Makes sense. I like that.
Yeah,
You mentioned earlier, and I read it on the site too, that you built this setting from the campaign first. It wasn't a setting and then you fit the campaign into that. Can you expand on that?
Well, yeah. Basically, the idea here is that I like. Okay, moving back. One, I love Battlestar Galactica. It's probably, I agree with you, Gary. It's probably my all-time favorite show. But I have to admit, I was really, really impacted by Babylon 5 when it came out, right? And although that basically tells my age, I was really impacted by the fact that I had this 5-year arc in which all these things changed and things didn't get rebooted by the next episode like I was accustomed to watching when I was watching Star Trek The Next Generation, which I also loved. But, every episode began just the same way the previous one did, at least until the last few seasons. And here in Babylon 5, everything was different, right? Every season, something had changed and things could not go back to the way they were. Even characters died and all these story things were changing. And it made for a gripping story. And that's the kind of story you see when you read The Lord of the Rings or when you see all these epic things, right? The world is in danger. Things change. Heroes have to beat unsurmountable odds. There's a price to be paid. Not everyone gets through intact. So how can we tell that story in a role-playing game? And the only way we could do it is basically by breaking the setting. So we had to build a setting, make it cool, make it interesting, and then get ready to take a wrecking ball to it and make sure that the wrecking ball touches all the right dramatic parts so that the players will feel that the world is changing around them and they can get control of the game. And that's why this game in the end was designed as the setting was built for the campaign rather than the campaign for the setting.
Right, because, well, that feels very Savage Worlds like, because unlike Gary's favorite setting, Forgotten Realms, that have been pretty much the same for the last 30 years, it's more like 50 Fathoms, right? Where you play a plot point campaign, you solve the problem, and then the world changes. You can't really go back to it the same way. Is that the approach you've gone with? Is it a plot point campaign or just a serial?
No, it is not a plot point campaign. First of all, I think Wizards of the Coast, Gary, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think Wizards of the Coast did some funky things with 4th edition when with Forgotten Realms. They changed many things, right? And I think they didn't get much love for that. But yeah, that proves your point, Eric. That things that Forgotten Realms are not supposed to change. But in any case, yes, it's not a plot point campaign. It's a sequential campaign. Basically, the players begin at novice level. The universe has an apparently bright future. There's maybe one or two mysterious and unsettling things going on, but as the adventure progresses, everything starts to fall apart. The mysteries the players get a sense of what's really going on. They will be drawn into several adventures that shape the story, that change the way things happen. And by the time they reach heroic or maybe even legendary, everything is very, very different from the way it started, right? And that was done on purpose. I was not afraid of the goal here was never to try to create a line where we will be able to create 7 or 20 more modules that run on the same setting. The goal here was to help players and GMs tell a cool story. At the same time, what cannot happen, and if you're being a player, you know about this, you cannot lead players by the nose so hard that they will feel that they have no sense, that they're not making choices, right? And that's where plot point campaigns are so good. They're so good at making you make the choices when you are ready to make them. So there was a pacing activity here. There are several mini sandboxes within the games where the players can do their stuff, and there are stages where they basically can stop and do their own thing and then get back to the campaign when they're ready. So yes, there's a bit of GM direction, but there's also flexibility so that they don't feel they're railroaded from end to end.
One of the main things people want to know when they get into a new setting is, well, who are we? What do we play? What do we do in this world? So you already explained that instead of actual, well, I guess they're kind of races, but more cultural backgrounds in a way that, you know, each of them have a specialty. So from what I understand, everybody is human because it's a hard sci-fi, right? Nobody could play an alien. But what about the rest? Who are they? What do they do in Seven Worlds?
Right. Well, first, it's hard sci-fi, but it's very humanistic sci-fi because you have seen many excellent games, Savage Worlds and non-Savage Worlds. For example, Eclipse Phase, where you have mutants and you've got artificial beings and you've got all these kinds of futuristic alien humans, so to speak, right? Evolutions of humanity. In the case of Seven Worlds, we try to keep it to humans so that it's very humanistic, very that's another way to make it approachable to players, right? Yes, it's the future, but there's many things that look similar to our current 21st century, and that also makes it easier for them to jump in. So yes, there's humans, and you create your character just like in Savage Worlds. You can be, most players will belong to an organization that is called the Circle, and it's basically like a quasi-military organization, like the Rangers, so to speak. They're basically the Space Rangers, and they take care of the peace, and they help. That helps keep the peace in the worlds. And within that organization, they can be anything they want. They can be a diplomat, they can be a fighter, they can be a scion. There's about 50, almost 60 new edges in the book, plus several hindrances. But they create characters just the way they've always made them, created them. There's only one new trait, which is called mental toughness, which is similar to normal toughness, but it's basically 2 plus half of smarts, and that's what you use against psionic attacks. There's a lot of new powers, and basically those are the main differences. I don't think there's many differences actually with creating a character in normal Savage Worlds and here, and they can be almost anything they want. The only requirement is that they belong to this organization, and that's mostly because of the plot in the campaign book, right? If players or the GM just want to use the setting as it is and forget about the campaign and do their own thing, they can create anything they want, right? We talked about rogue science, for example, in the book, or about miners, and although those are not explored in the campaign, if you want to make a campaign with them and maybe you run your own hard Firefly campaign in space, for example, you could do it, and there's enough edges and enough rules to support that.
I like that. I like to keep it close to the core rules. It makes less things to remember when you play. But you were talking about the trappings earlier, the trappings that make the setting hard sci-fi. Are there any examples of trappings, how you can trap certain powers or certain edges to make them feel more hard sci-fi in that section of the book?
Well, one part of the section that I would like to mention, and I think it'll fit with what we're going to be talking now, is we created this concept of assistants, and an assistant is like what right now Siri or Alexa or Cortana is to every one of us on our phones or on our machines or whatever. But imagine it like 100 or 200 years in the future, right? How would that assistant look like? And they would basically, we would choose their voice, their personality, their skills. They would become our true confidence. They would know what we know. They would negotiate for us. They would help us in so many things. They would be our assistants, but also our friends. So there was a really, really cool feature, right? What if every player could have a sidekick? But how do we do this from the point of view of the rules? We did not want every player to have to run 2 characters. We don't want, if there was 5 players on the table, we don't want to have 10 characters, 1 player and their assistant. So in the end, in game terms, the assistant is an extension of our character in the sense that the assistant has a few new skills that they can run, and they can do their own thing, and the player can use their action for them to play, or they can use their action for their assistant, and during combat they can spend a penny, and besides themselves the assistant gets to play, and in that case it's like they're getting a free turn, but they can only use the skills that the assistant gets to use, and assistants can do things that players can't do. And that's what makes them cool, right? So you pay a penny, you can access these skills and these situations in which you as a human being would not be able to access. And that's because your assistant is maybe hacking the network around you, or using some kind of device around, or maybe examining the records for that video camera in front of you and trying to locate which one of the people walking around the street is the enemy that you should shoot at or fire at, or doing all these cool things that are basically powers that the character is accessing, but the trapping again is the assistant, right? The intelligent Siri or Cortana or Alexa.
So,
and those are virtual, right? They're only virtual.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask too. Okay, so it's not an Android or something like that you can have. No. Okay.
No, it's software. It's software. You have lenses such as HoloLens or Google Glass or whatever you want to call them, right? Which allow you to see reality, and you can see the assistant floating around you, or you can just hear him or her talking to you directly via a small hearing aid, like a more ear lobe thing, and they're around you, but they're not physical. They're software, and they have the ability to hack devices, the ability to talk to other people, the ability to negotiate with other assistants, and they have their own little set of skills. But from the point of view of the rules, the idea was to extend what the player character can do without adding a new character next to them, basically to give them more things to do. Which is the cool thing, right? It's what we want as players.
Well, plus Eric gets a friend out of the deal.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell the listeners what your virtual friend looks like, Eric? Never mind. I love putting you on the spot, man. It's so funny just to see the look on your face, like, oh.
When I was a teenager, and I used to do a bunch of things I wasn't supposed to do, without getting into too much detail. I have this imaginary friend, and called him the Crawler, and he had this, that cap, and then there's like a little wheel that spins.
Mm-hmm.
What's the name of it?
Yep, like a beanie with a helicopter
like a
deal
beanie,
on it.
like helicopter beanie.
Yeah,
that's what my assistant would look like in the virtual world.
Wow. Okay.
I think that's another great opportunity for player character expression, right? We included four sample characters in the game, and one of them, for example, the assistant of one of them is a hard-bitten major-like military character, and that assistant keeps the NPC straight. Another one has this this girl who is like the one who spreads all the rumors and who's always interested in the cool things and has all these pink heart-shaped things pasted on her notebook. Another one has another NPC, for example, and they're described in the book, so I'm not spoiling anything. Another one has this lost her dad at an early age, and she's so obsessed by her dad that she created the assistant in the shape of her dad, so that it's like her dad giving her advice. And the fourth one is this antisocial person, and he dislikes people so much that he decided to create a black dot, a floating black dot in the system, and to try to give him as little personality as possible. So he has a floating black dot that he sees, and the dot is his assistant. So I can imagine all the crazy things that players will be able to create. Maybe one wants a black cap, or a flying Tinkerbell, or whatever they want to, and basically they can have it, and it can make great interactions. And there's an optional rule for GMs in which they can allow other players, a player to play another player's assistant's personality, right? So the stats are in your player, but maybe the player next to you gets to talk to you and to role play your assistant. And that's a very interesting interaction opportunity for the table.
Hi, Eric. This is your virtual assistant, Gary. How can I help you today?
Go to sleep. Go to sleep. I'm bored. I'm bored.
Oh, did you say you wanted me to take my shirt off?
But you know what I was thinking is what Harrison must be thinking right now, listening to this. He probably can't wait to play this.
I'm curious though. Could you take your virtual assistant? Like, is there? Like, I actually have quite a few questions right now as it stands. Psionics isn't something that I've ever touched on in Savage Worlds. I'm not exactly sure how it works. Did you change the rules for psionics in this book?
No, and for all intents and purposes, psionics is magic. We added a rule so that there's something like that's a physical manifestation and a mental manifestation. So if I want to create panic in you, that's mental. But if I want to make a table float, that's physical. And the reason we divided that is that obviously you need a lot more energy to make a table float than you need to just change a few hundreds of thousands of electrons in your head. So it would make sense that it's easier to do something mental than to do something physical. But other than that little thing, it's basically magic using the plain Savage Worlds rules of psionics.
Yeah, you don't have to learn anything new. It's just the good old psionics as it stands.
It's just the difference from miracles and spellcasting, Gary. It's just trappings, really.
Yep. Nope. That's cool. I've never played with psionics inside the game. I know that the superpowers the superpowers has their own compendium and they do some weird thing, but psionics is just something that I've never actually gotten into. Never had to play one in a game. The other thing too is implants and stuff like that. Like, as it stands right now in 2017, we all kind of know that we're going to become symbiont, half human, half machine hybrids in the future somewhere. Is this part of the campaign setting? Like, for example, so you're saying that the assistant would be seen through glasses or through lenses. What about just having eyeball implants, like completely replace it instead of...
I tried to avoid that in the game. I agree with you that we're approaching the moment when we will be, hybrids. I wanted to feel very human, right? Right now, the players are human, and they will understand that they will understand humanity in an easier fashion. The lenses are basically contacts, so you won't see them.
Mm-hmm.
We are assuming that when you get born, you get installed a tiny little chip in your head that is the one that allows your assistant to talk to you and that kind of thing. But it's very, very... the premise we're using is this. There will be a time when, yes, we are thinking about the hybrid and the cyborg and all that, but people are not only interested in real life in what they can do, they're also interested in how they look. And if you look weird or strange or repelling, no matter what you can do, people will not massively go there. There will always be some people in the world that do it, but most people will not walk down the street looking awful or looking distasteful until it becomes more fashionable, right, to do so. So by following that assumption, to the end, we just said, okay, yes, there might be one or two minor technical things, for example, DNA control to improve, but let's try to avoid cyborgs or hybrid human machines for now, and let's keep it human. And as I said, I agree that that's not the direction we as a society most likely are going, but it made sense in the context of the game.
Yeah, no, I got you. The like with all the stuff that's going on in the world today, it doesn't really even take that much of a difference, skin color. and you can become a completely segregated whatchamacallit. Well, something I found interesting is you were talking about the circle, but you've also got psionics. And what I was reading, or what my impression was, that those two groups are at odds with one another. You've got the circle on one side, and the psions are sort of the outcasts, and they're doing stuff with each other.
Well, that's an interesting bit of backstory. There's two organizations. One's called the Circle, and that's where the characters belong to. And there's one called the Scion Brotherhood, and that's basically where all the Scions are grouped. Because another trope of the setting, and you've seen it in Babylon 5 or in many science fiction books, is that there has to be some measure of control over Scions. Otherwise, either they will take control of society, or society will try to kill them because they're afraid of them. So there's got to be some way to appropriately insert Scions into society in such a way that non-Scions accept them instead of fear them or detest them. And the Scion Brotherhood is the mechanism to make that, right? So it has things like a Scion vow that all Scions commit to in order to defend the rights of non-Scions and all those kinds of things. And the interesting bit of backstory is that both of organizations, which are a bit of at odds with each other, they were founded by two people who were friends in their childhood. And that's I won't go into more detail because that's part of the backstory of the setting and the campaign, but yeah, that's an interesting part. And the idea was to make sure, again, if Scions existed, how would they really fit into society? Would they become our overlords? Or would we hunt them and kill them all? What would be the best way? And if we look at it from a positive way, the ideal way is that the positive way, or the optimistic way, is that we will find a way to connect them to society and to make them work as a productive part of society without hating them or without segregating them. And that's what we try to represent in the game.
That's very cool. I noticed in the review that Andy Slack put out, he kind of breaks down everything into what it's got. There's like 11 pages of gear, 5 pages on Scions, 22 pages of settings rules. There's even a bestiary. I guess you would find on some of these Earth twin planets, you find different creatures and stuff like that. If everybody is human and there is no, but they're kind of, I don't know, I want to say too much, but I think there is some alien life going on here. Is the bestiary just consist of creatures that you would find on the planets, weird horses, pack mules, squiggly stuff and things?
Well, okay, well, first of all, this is not spoiling anything. There is one known alien life form, intelligent alien life form, that is interacting with humans. They're very mysterious, but they are well known. So there are aliens in the setting, at least one known alien. Second of all, the bestiary has beast animals from Earth. It also has native animals from some of the planets that the players can visit, but it also has virtual enemies and virtual beasts. And
slick,
right?
Great
idea. You have this parallel universe, like I don't know if you've read Ready Player One, or if you're ready to watch the movie next year, in which basically you can go into this virtual world, and there's a virtual world in Seven Worlds. What would you find there if you could create anything? So, for example, the bestiary has cowboys and outlaws. And they have a place in the campaign. So you get all these interesting things that you can do with virtual reality, right? And if, let's say, a government institution opened a virtual reality office so that people could visit them in virtual reality, how would their security look? How would they protect themselves? Would they use human beings as guards, or would they use something else? When you can create anything, right? So there's all these interesting things that we could explore via the bestiary, and that's what we try to do.
Have you seen?
And finally, the last comment, I'm sorry, is that Andy Slack, I was really so happy when he reviewed that. And again, I will use the word humbled. I mean, Andy has worked with Traveler, 2300 AD, which are like seminal science fiction and hard sci-fi RPGs, and having him review it was also awesome, and I think another validation for hard science fiction fans.
I like how he breaks it down because you sort of know what you're getting out of this book. 200 plus pages of sci-fi goodness that you can use in basically anything. I was going to say, do you remember the movie Elysium when he has to go to the welfare office and it's a robot and the robot's just asking direct questions and he can't really answer directly, so he starts getting mad and the robot's like, calm down, and then it calls the police and stuff. It's interesting stuff. I'm kind of looking forward to having a virtual cowboy fight in Eric's mind. That would be something I'd be in for.
Yeah, especially because, you mentioned virtual realities. That brings the point that you can probably use any other Savage World settings that you have and put the players right into that world, right?
Yes, you could play 50 Fathoms inside 7 worlds. The catch, though, for any virtual thing, and something we noticed during playtesting, is that unless what happens in the virtual world has some kind of impact to the quote real unquote characters, it's not much fun. If whatever that happens in the virtual world has to have some meaning to the real characters, otherwise you're just playing the other game, right? And it's not connected. So
like in the movie The Matrix, right?
Like in the Matrix, exactly. Like in the Matrix, if you get damaged in the virtual world, what happens in the physical world? Can you be traced and tracked in the virtual world, and your location in the physical world be detected? So we had to work these things out so as to make sure that going to the virtual world, yes, you can go to a playland and play Evernight in the virtual world if you want, but ideally, whatever happens there should have an impact in the real world.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you muted.
Sorry.
You muted.
Thanks. Thanks. Why are you so mean to me, Eric? I can't wait to get my assless chap cowboy into your brain and psionically F with you. Well, I don't know if we've covered this. It's kind of weird that this is the last thing that I'm thinking of, but have we sort of gone over what is Seven Worlds about? What are we doing when we come into it? Like Deadlands, we all know is Wild West. 50 Fathoms is pirates. When I show up inside of Seven Worlds, do I just live on a planet, or am I a miner in space?
That's we haven't talked about that, right? Have we?
Yeah.
Talk about the circle? Yeah, I think I asked it earlier.
Yes, you did, and I did in the answer. You're right. Well, the premise of the setting is that it's the year 2217, and humans have expanded from Earth to 6 other stars and planets. So that's the 7 worlds, and they are traveling between these 7 worlds, and there's commerce, and there's communications, and there's societies in each of these 7 worlds. And there's been a war or two, or one of two bad things, but mostly it's an optimistic setting in which humans feel that they have reached the moment in which they're ready to jump from 7 worlds to the rest of the galaxy. 7 worlds is very small. 7 stars is a very small space, right? It's still an insignificant part of the Milky Way, and they're ready to go in. And in this optimistic time, when they're ready to jump in, the players are this range organization, and obviously something will go wrong, and that's where the campaign starts.
If you're traveling with Eric in a spaceship and it's 2217, you know something's going to go wrong. You know, the first time. Yeah, torpedoes. I'm
sure many players are going to get a hold of that and start doing that now after this podcast.
So trademark.
When this all comes together, I don't know where it's at. I'm not going to sit here and skim through the web pages and look at it, but there is this one interesting. Actually, here it is right here. What is it about? So this thing here says it's an epic science fiction story. This is right off of the Seven Worlds campaign. .com, RPG.com. It involves space exploration, new technologies, the impact of new customs on society, space battles, a few aliens, several mysteries, and of course, and this is the question, a great war, TM, a fight against overwhelming odds, TM, and a team of heroes that find a way to turn the tide, TM. Now, when I was looking at the YouTube video, it seemed to me that there were 7 sections, and somehow I could combine those 7 sections into one great big book. I'm assuming that a great war, a fight against overwhelming odds, and find a way to turn the tide are separate stories?
Actually, the 7 modules are connected. They tell one single story, and in fact, well, it was not coincidence that we decided on 7 modules, right? It makes sense to make 7 modules since your game is called 7 Worlds. And besides the book, the setting guide, and the 7 modules, I was planning on releasing 1-volume campaign book which compiles all 7 modules. So if you want everything printed, you could get your setting guide and your campaign book, and it should have around 260 pages by the time it's finished. So it's going to be like a big, huge campaign book, like the adventure paths that Paizo publishes every once in a while, which are like big fat books, and that's what you'll get. And so yeah, that fight against overwhelming odds, there was a bit of tongue-in-cheek trademark lettering on the webpage, because we've seen this before, right? We know the kind of story we're gonna see. We know the kind of story that we're gonna play. The thing is, actually, if you look around, there's not many campaigns that allow players to do that, to save the entire galaxy or universe and to see the impact of that. And it's like playing the Lord of the Rings, right? Could you really play the Lord of the Rings campaign from end to end? How would it look, right? When sections of when each one of the beats in the story of the Lord of the Rings happens, right? And that's what we try to capture here.
See, if that was my Lord of the Rings, it would be one giant fat guy kicking a midget's ass, stealing his ring, and peeping in on women in local taverns. Because I could be invisible.
I hope if you get to play this, you Twitch the game, because I really would like to see that.
Not suited for work. One other thing that people want to know about, and I'm kind of curious, you touched on that earlier with the heat for the spaceships, but what about combat, spaceship combat? Is there any more to it than just the heat?
Okay, first of all, there's the heat. Second of all, there's the missiles. I talked about the fact that we're using the missile rules very heavily. There's a lot of new weapons in 7 Worlds, lasers, missiles. There are several types of missiles, of missile payloads. There's railguns. However, they are trappings. Again, a laser beam is basically you make your shooting roll and you hit or you don't hit, and that's against the ship's toughness and the ship's armor, right? So it's the trapping is different. A couple of things that I might mention about the spaceship combat is, number one, movement. It's using the chase rules, but it's using the rules for location, for movement. It's using the rules in the Explorers Edition. Remember when you had to put 10 tokens one after the other one, and ships would move 1 or 2 tokens of that. In the new rules right now, yes, in the new rules, basically your location is determined by the card number, but in the old rules, you basically would move 1 or 2 spaces forward, right, in the track. And the reason I use those rules is that inertia. Again, in space, you don't just get to jump ahead or jump back. If you move too fast and you leave someone behind, it's hard to catch you. So we had to find a way to simulate that, and I found out that we could do that with the old movement part of the chase rules. But other than that, it's the Savage World combat rules we know.
Do the vehicle rules have their place in there, or you just stick to the old chase rules?
I stuck to the chase rules. The reason for that was that, as I said, where the most new moving parts, the space combat rules are the part where the most new moving parts are, right? There's heat, there's missiles, there's again what I was, the movement. So I had to be careful not to make it too complicated. And if we add the vehicle rules on top of that, with free movement, it makes things much harder. So we try to avoid that. But it could be done. It could be done. And another thing is, one of the sidebars says also, what happens if instead of doing all these vehicle rules, you just use mass combat rules and play the space battle as one mass combat, and that's also included as an optional rule.
Oh, nice. Well, I think that makes both Gary and I happy because we're not a big fan of the vehicle rules, so that makes sense. We can get behind that. One last thing, and we're just going to talk about this shortly because the plan for this is to release it the episode is to release the episode when the Kickstarter comes on. So yeah, it's still up in the air, isn't it? Because you've got some news that something that might or may not work that you're waiting on, right?
Yes. To be frank, and also so your listeners can know, I was targeting the middle to the end of September, and that might still be the date. However, some interesting opportunities with publishers and other interested parties have appeared, and assuming those become a reality, it'll be great news because there will be many more avenues to get the product to players and to interested parties and to make more promotion and advertising. However, if that happens, maybe the dates might have to shift a bit in order to accommodate all these new things, right? So I'm very, very, very happy about the possibility of these publishing deals and agreements. I can't say more than that for now, and maybe it won't work out. But yes, hopefully we'll get this done by the end of September, and if not, just a little bit after that.
And the book is fully written, fully illustrated, laid out. Everything is ready. You just need the money for the print run, right?
Yes, the book is ready. Everything is fully illustrated. We are so basically when we make the Kickstarter, people will know that assuming we obviously reach the funding goal, the basic funding goal, they will receive a product. It's not because barring some kind of disaster, the product is ready to be the digital product is ready to be delivered. So that'll make people, I hope, very, very happy to know that as soon as we get the funding or as soon as the Kickstarter ends, they will be getting digital copies, and there's no need to be concerned about whether the product will exist or not. Right? The Kickstarter's goal is basically to get funding to make the print run and to make the physical product available. And that's what we're going to be working on.
Yo, motherfuckers, you all best back up. I always got a gun, I always come strap up. This ain't a game of pool, it ain't no time for no rack up. It's the motherfucking time for the motherfucking wrap up. Anyone who disagrees will get smack up. See me back in school when I shouldn't have learned to add up. Found a gun on the floor, instead I picked that up. Anyway, sorry, I'm motherfucking back up. What I'm trying to say is it's time for the wrap up. Yeah, this one goes out to all the ladies and all the men out there. Everyone in the front row, grease up. Yeah. Oh yeah. Tasty. Wrap up.
All right, this is the big wrap up. I'd like to thank Luis for coming on the show, giving us the great details of the 7 Worlds. And I'd also especially like to thank my co-host Eric, my man, my turd bissel man, my turd pedo.
Well, I'm excited, Luis. I have to say you've got something really solid here, and without having read the book yet, I can honestly say that I'm going to try this out. Definitely.
Yeah, it looks good. The art looks good. The idea behind it looks good. I'm pretty happy that I don't have to read an entire setting book. Note to Eric if he ever makes his own setting.
Thank you guys for inviting me, for having me here, and I appreciate the opportunity to share with you and with your listeners what 7 Worlds is about. If possible, I'd like to ask anyone who's listening to the show, if you want to hear more about the product or read more stuff or even try it out or try the 3D maps. We didn't get a chance to talk about the 3D maps. Go to 7worldsrpg.com. And there's a link to subscribe to the mailing list, and there's a lot of downloads already available there.
Yeah, there's some good stuff. That's where we did all our research for today.
You won't find any. You won't find anything about torpedoes, but you can send us at the Wild Eye your cool ideas for torpedoes. All right, let's wrap this show up, Eric.
Yeah, speaking of which, this is Eric saying, when all else fails, torpedoes.
And this is Gary saying, everybody, keep your pants on, keep it fun, and stay away from the torpedoes. Wow.
The Wild Eye Podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by Pinnacle Entertainment Group or official Pinnacle licensees. Any of the products mentioned on our show or appear on our website are the property and copyright of the respected owners. All music and artwork is used with permission of Pinnacle Entertainment Group. All items are used under fair use and educational and review purposes. All other items are the intellectual property of the Wild Eye Podcast.